Hi, I'm Andrea, and today we're going to practice English. Sometimes when you're learning English as a second language, it would be helpful to your job prospects to get a high school diploma in the United States. Even if you have advanced degrees in other countries, it's good for your employers or prospective employers in the United States to know that you have a very high level of proficiency in English, so much so that you can get a high school diploma in the United States. And you don't have to go to high school to get that diploma. All you have to do is pass a test. It's called the GED or the HiSET. HiSET means high school equivalency test. And GED is a similar test that is equivalent to graduating from high school in the United States. And it gives you a diploma, which is like a certificate that you can show your prospective employers so that they understand that you have great communication skills in English. So you not only need to have good grammar and vocabulary in English, but you also need to understand some basic literacy concepts. And I want to share some of those with you today. These are things that you would need to understand in order to pass the test to get your high school diploma. So I'm going to share this presentation with you, and we are going to skip over to the part about figurative language. Figurative language is something that is used in a non-literal way to add an emotional effect to your communication. So it can be used in writing, or it can be used in your speech, and it's often used in fiction, poetry, critical theory, and speeches because it has an emotional impact on the person with whom you're communicating because it appeals to their imagination. And it often adds humor, color, character, and interest to any sort of cultural conversation or interaction or story. So here are some types of figurative language that you can learn the term for and see some examples of and understand how to use in your own speech. One example is a simile. A simile. A simile is a comparison of two things using the words like, than, or as. So you're saying, for example, her smile was beaming like the sun. We're comparing her smile with the sun, and we're saying that it's bright, shiny, beaming, radiating, glowing like the sun. We're not saying it is the sun, we're saying it is like the sun in the sense that it's bright, shiny, beaming, and radiant, giving off energy like the sun. That's a simile. A metaphor, on the other hand, compares two things, but instead of saying that one thing is like another, we're saying that two things are equal. We're saying one thing is another. We're equating them. It's a direct comparison. So an example would be, the eyes are the windows to the soul. We're not saying that the eyes are like windows. We are saying that they are windows to the soul, that they're an opening through which you can see into a person's soul. So the eyes are the entryway, the window, the opening, the viewpoint into a person's soul. We're equating these two things, and that's a metaphor. This is a long word, onomatopoeia. Say that. Onomatopoeia. Good. This is a word that imitates the sound to which it refers. So boom is a word that imitates a sound. Imagine two things smacking into each other and making a huge boom, or maybe a firecracker. Boom, an explosion of some sort. Boom is a word that describes the sound. Bang, crash, buzz. Buzz imitates the sound that it's describing. So this is often used in music and poetry and everyday speech to describe a sound. And sometimes you can just make a word up. It doesn't have to be in the dictionary per se, but if the sound of the word sounds like the sound that you're describing, you're using onomatopoeia. Personification is a great technique that you can use to ascribe or give human traits or characteristics to something that is not human. So you can give human traits to an animal, an inanimate object, or something that's abstract in order to describe it by comparing it in a non-direct way to a person. For example, the flowers were dancing in the breeze. Flowers cannot dance. They are stationary. They are rooted in the ground. They cannot dance. But if the wind or the breeze is blowing them and they look like they're moving in a rhythmic way, it looks like they're dancing. And so we ascribe the human trait or characteristic of being able to dance to the flower and the wind because its movement is similar to that. And that's a very poetic way to describe things. Juxtaposition is when you place two objects side by side for comparison. And often this is for the purpose of contrasting two things, pointing out how they are different. When you juxtapose them, you put them side by side and examine them and you say, oh, these things are the same in some ways, but they are different in others. And so an example would be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This was a story of a man who had two personalities, one very, very good and one very, very evil. And so when he changed from one personality to the next, it was almost like he was a different person. Dr. Jekyll became Mr. Hyde, and they had opposite personalities. And so they were juxtaposed in a story about this person who had two extreme personalities. A paradox is something that seems like a contradiction. It seems like it's contradicting itself. It's saying the opposite of what was just said, and yet it is nonetheless true. So this is a true statement that seems like it cannot be true. So an example comes from the Bible. This is from Mark chapter 8, verse 35. And it says, whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel will save it. So Jesus is telling this to his followers. Whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for Jesus' sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it, will save his life. So you want to save your life, you have to lose it for the gospel. That seems like a contradiction, and yet it's true. So this is something that's a paradox. It's self-contradictory. It seems like, oh, how can I save my life by losing my life? Because you're losing your life for something better than what you already had, and that makes it true. So it's a paradox. Hyperbole. Hyperbole. It's an exaggeration. An example would be, I am so hungry that I could eat a horse. So you could be really, really hungry, but no human being, I don't think, could eat an entire horse and all the meat that's in a horse in one sitting. And not that I don't know that many people eat horses anyway, but there's a lot of meat in a horse. It's a huge animal and no human being could be that hungry. So it's a big exaggeration. It's going way beyond what is true, but it's to communicate in a non-literal way that you're very, very hungry. An allusion is a reference to a character or event that happened in the past or happened in another piece of literature. So this example is, his smile is like kryptonite to me. To understand this example, you would have to know what kryptonite is. And kryptonite comes from the Superman story. And Superman came from another planet, and kryptonite was a material from that planet that made him weak. So normally Superman had these superhuman powers. He was a superhero, but kryptonite made him weak. It was the only thing that made him weak. And so in order to understand this statement, you would have to know the story of Superman and what kryptonite was. It's an allusion to the Superman story. So his smile is like kryptonite to me, means that his smile is disarming and makes me weak, and it's the only thing that affects me in that way. A pun is a joke. And it plays with the meaning of words. Sometimes words have more than one meaning, and you can use the double meaning of a word to make a joke. So an example would be, why are teddy bears never hungry? Because they are always stuffed. So a teddy bear has stuffing inside. It's full of cotton to make it soft and squishy. A teddy bear is a stuffed animal. But when we as humans get hungry and then we eat and we feel full, a lot of times we say, oh, I am stuffed. I ate way too much. So there's more than one meaning to the word stuffed. This is a pun. Why are teddy bears never hungry? They're always stuffed, not with food, but with cotton or whatever the synthetic material is that makes them fluffy. And that is playing on two meanings of the word. Imagery is when the author describes the physical aspects of a scene so the reader can picture it. So this appeals to your five senses, your sight, smell, hearing, taste, and sense of touch. So when you're describing a scene, you want to appeal to as many senses as possible in order to make the person listening or reading your description to kind of experience that scene in his or her mind. An example would be the midnight blue truck glazed with raindrops shimmered in the evening sunshine. Okay, so this is appealing to your sight. Midnight blue is a very specific color, and you know what a truck looks like. And to glaze something, that's to have something shiny on the outside. Raindrops, we're all familiar with what raindrops look like. It shimmered, it sparkled, it glowed in the evening sunshine. So you know the color that the sunshine takes in the evening, it's got a special hue to it as the sun is setting. And there's a special light effect from evening sunshine reflecting off of raindrops. And that's what this little scene is trying to relay to the reader. It's an image of a truck that's blue, covered in raindrops in the evening sunshine. Symbolism refers to using a symbol. So a symbol is something that represents something else. It can represent an idea or a belief system or something bigger than itself. So, for example, a rose represents love. When a man gives a woman a rose, or a friend gives a rose to another friend, that's representing the love or the friendship that they have between them. It's more than just a flower. The gift means that there's a feeling behind the gift. Same thing with a dove. A dove represents peace. Okay, it's not just a white bird. It represents peace. So a lot of times it's used on a flag, or it's used in a story, and it's a symbol for something greater than itself. We also have something called irony, and there are different kinds of irony. We can have verbal irony when a person states something but means the opposite. And another way to call verbal irony is sarcasm. This is used in humor a lot. So you might say something like, oh, I can't wait to study for this big test next week. And you're being sarcastic. You're being verbally ironic. You really don't want to study for the big test next week. But you're saying, oh, I can't wait. I'm so excited. I'm really looking forward to studying for this big test. That's being sarcastic or verbally ironic. Another form of irony is dramatic irony, when the audience knows something that the characters do not. So in the story of Romeo and Juliet, which is a Shakespeare play, Romeo kills himself next to a sleeping Juliet because he thinks she's dead. But the audience knows that she's just sleeping. So that was dramatic irony. The audience knows something that the player in the play doesn't know. And if the actor had known what the audience knows, then he wouldn't have done what he did. So that's dramatic irony. Situational irony is when you expect something to happen, but the opposite happens. So for example, there could be a post on Facebook complaining about Facebook. So it's ironic to use Facebook to speak badly about Facebook. That's situational irony. It's a funny situation that you would post something on Facebook that is saying something against posting something on Facebook. So I hope that helps. The GED is something to prepare for. There are a lot of different components. There's a math component and a science component. and an English component. So you need a lot of different fields of knowledge. Of course, English knowledge is the most important because it's in English and you do have to understand the questions that you're reading and responding to. But the literature component has some interesting things that you and I can learn about in this video series. So if there's anything that you have a question about or you want to know more about, or if you'd like me to make a video about, you can leave a comment down below and let me know and I will respond. Thank you so much.